Hi, and thank you for joining Pursuit Grad today. We are a mentorship community hosted by Pursuit PR, and our intention really is to empower, inspire, and connect people through some amazing executives that we have in our network and in our corner in technology, finance, media, and real estate industries. So today I'm thrilled to introduce Joe Cohen, who is the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at Axis Capital. Joe has been a mentor to me for many, many years, since college, actually. And we're so thrilled to have you here.
Hey, Rachel, thank you for having me. Yeah, I don't even know when we met, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, it's got to be 2005 or 2006.
Oh my goodness. Wow, time flies. Well,
Absolutely. And, I thought a perfect way to start the conversation today would be actually to reminisce a little bit about time at Syracuse, where we share an alma mater, and which was a big connective tissue for us at first, and kind of ask a couple questions about that. So one is, what do you believe were the greatest benefits of attending Newhouse at Syracuse University?
yeah, so thank you again for having me. And it's interesting. I think our relationship really brings to life a lot of the benefits that are part of being engaged in the Newhouse network and being an alum. So some of the benefits, I mean, one is you're getting a world-class education, great program, great instructors. You just take so much out of it, and you learn the fundamentals of the way the media business works, how to write well, how to present yourself well. And there's just so much that comes out of the actual education. In addition to that, the Newhouse brand carries a lot of cachet and equity in journalism, media, advertising, marketing. So there's having that mark of distinction on your CV. But what I was getting at with my opening comment is that you're also part of the network. And it's interesting because part of what I remember being the spiel that you hear when you're visiting campus when you're a kid is you hear about the Newhouse Mafia and being part of the Newhouse network. And I found that it's a real thing that Newhouse alum tend to really look after one another, create opportunities for one another, mentor one another. The school does such a good job of creating forums and channels and events where you're able to engage with others that it helps foster that. And Rachel, I remember, it's remarkable. It was 16 years ago, but I remember you reaching out to me as a student at Syracuse, and it was clear to me right off the bat that you were someone who had talent and ability, and just definitely it was evident. And we kept a dialogue, and then eventually I recruited you to MWW, where I was at the time. So that's just an example of the Newhouse network in practice. So for all those reasons, those are all examples of the great benefits that come with being a Newhouse grad.
Yeah, I agree. And you were one of the first mentors, outside of people in my family, basically, that I was like, okay, I really think this person would be a great mentor. And I remember learning about, sort of teaching myself and feeling it out. How do I get a mentor, basically? Do I ask this person? Do I, how do I keep in touch with them? And I always wanted it to be genuine. Like, I didn't want it to just be, I need you and you're here to serve me. It's more, maybe there's things that I can help with, or, also just genuinely liking you and thinking that you were someone that I could trust. And that was something I really learned, with you, because I would reach out to you and sort of update you on what I was doing. And I remember the beginning thinking, I hope he doesn't think like, that I'm being too self-promotional or anything like that. But you were really like open. And I remember, I'm sure you do, throughout my whole career really, but especially in those early days, I asked you so many questions, about how to approach my bosses, day-to-day work. And then when I was, working with at the same company, confiding in you on different things. And I just think it's so important to know how to create a mentorship relationship and what to get out of it for both parties.
No, I think that part of what you did to your benefit is you were proactive. you went out and identified individuals, and you identified me as someone to contact because you were interested in getting into the communications field, and you made it a point to, not just with me, build relationships and broaden your perspective. And I think about people who may not have the benefit of going to Newhouse. And right now, something that's top of mind for a lot of people in the industry, fortunately and finally, is the importance of diversity and inclusion and creating opportunities for students and new professionals of diverse backgrounds. So I think that part of, for those who don't have that opportunity, part of it is of having the degree or not being able to go to, not being able to go to Newhouse. I think part of that is on us to go out and look to spread our knowledge, to find talent, to source talent, and to create those opportunities. And for people who are listening, who are new professionals and students, also reach out. Go out on LinkedIn, email people. That's that proactive behavior can't hurt. But I do want to share that the obligation is also on us as professionals to help create opportunities and pay it forward.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I think that's definitely something that you did as well with me and and many other people, where you were involved in PRSA, and you were also just always open to, helping people to whatever extent made sense. And that actually helped your career too, because you were recruiting talent for your organizations and building great teams. So that's a win-win as well.
It is.
And I remember too, we worked together as I volunteered, with you to do some initiatives with PRSA. And that was that. And I remember doing that and thinking, well, yes, this is beneficial to me, but I feel like I could actually be helpful. Like I wanted to give something back to you also, by supporting you and working with you on those initiatives too.
No, and you got into it. I think it's a nice feeling to pay it forward. I think there's, PRSA is a really good organization for engaging with young talent through the PRSA Foundation, diverse talent. But in general, I think that just having that mindset that you're going to leverage your seat within your organization to create opportunities for people and to help open doors. And at different times, I think most people could think about mentors and influential figures in their lives, professional lives and personal lives. So it's important to try to do that yourself. At least that's my strong belief.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, another question around Syracuse, maybe on the non-business side or whatever you feel comfortable with, but I know that you had some fun experiences. I believe you were a radio host, among other things. What were some of your best memories from attending Syracuse?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of great memories, and you'd given me a heads up you were going to ask this, and I was thinking about it. And one that stands out it's a little bit of an emotional memory, is I remember my freshman year being on the steps of Newhouse 1. At that point, there were only 2 Newhouses. Now it's a much bigger structure, but that part of the campus is bigger. But anyway, I remember being at Newhouse 1, and it was a cold, snowy night, like most nights, and just pausing and looking out and thinking about how on those steps there were so many famous, legendary alum who had been there before me, and thinking, wow, I made it to this point, thinking about people who had helped influence me, like my grandparents who, weren't around at that time, but helped raise me. And I was thinking they'd be really just excited to see this. And, kind of the whole future was ahead of me. And I remember that was a special moment and an emotional moment. And I think that I'm one of many people who stood on those steps and felt that way. So it was just a memory that is lasting and that I think about whenever I'm on campus.
Oh, that's great. And do you get to go back still?
I haven't been back in a while. I was going pretty often up until a few years ago. Now, as I was a little bit late in the game starting a family, and now we've got a 3.5-year-old and a 1-year-old, and it's at some point I'm sure I'll bring we'll bring the boys to campus. But right now it's there's a lot of reasons for me to be home and to limit the amount of traveling I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's talk more broadly about your career, which is very impressive. what were some of your initial career goals and some of what you expected compared to what you learned along the way and how that's evolved?
Yeah. So if you go back to Syracuse and, I gave that image of me on the steps thinking about the famous people who went. So at that point, I was going to school for broadcast journalism. And like a lot of students, I'm thinking fame, glory, everything that comes with pursuing a broadcast degree. And I think that the what happened was, and I was very interested in eventually more and more in sports and entertainment. And I was, while I was on campus, as you mentioned, I was a professional radio jock. So my goal was to grow that career. And then what happened and what happens is, your goals change and your goals evolve as you get older and as you mature. And what I thought would be a temporary job, I went home with plans to go back to Syracuse to continue my radio career. I went home and I took a job at MWW, which is the communications firm. I thought it'd be kind of a short-term thing. And I stayed there 15 years and I had a wonderful experience and I grew dramatically and learning from people, we learned from a lot of the same people, Corrine Winters and Michael Kempner and Rich Tauberman, and among others. And it began to understand about business strategy and about managing teams and just developing my strategic mindset. And at a certain point, I realized that I was really enjoying what I was doing and I didn't want to leave. And I think that now what happened then was my goals began to change, and I decided that I was vested in pursuing for the long term a career in communications at that point. And I decided that I just want to be someone who is excellent at this job, and I want to be someone who's perceived as one of the best they are at what they do. And that was kind of broadly what my goal was. It wasn't I want to be here, I want to be there. It was kind of that's just, I want to be someone who's a master of their craft. And or as close as you could get. It's hard to really truly be a master of anything. But be someone who's very good at it at the very least. And then today I still share that passion for the field and for just trying to pursue excellence in the work that I do. But my goals have evolved as I become a husband and a father, and I still want a job that's intellectually stimulating and fulfilling, and I want to be in a great environment. That's something I think a lot about, one where I'm always growing and thriving and having great people surrounding me. So those are goals, but also key, not necessarily goals, but key attributes. But part of it too is a big goal that shapes me is I want to be a good parent and I want to be a good father. So I need a job where I'm able to deliver on that first part, but also deliver on my personal goals. So, as you, it was a journey from being like want to be a famous DJ to that. But that's where I am today. And it's always trying to strike that balance, like many people, of delivering on your professional goals and your personal goals.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, and I can relate because I also wanted to be a news anchor, more on the political side, business news side, and some different reasons for switching. But communication just offers just the flip side of that. And hey, this Pursuit grad video, is a way to get that that broadcast journalism career going. I'm just kidding. But one of the things you touched on, and this is just based on what you just said. You talked about being the master of your craft and also balancing, your personal and professional evolution. So how important was it to develop your teams to support your growth? And, what are some high level thoughts that you have on that?
It's critical. And once you become a manager, early on when you're developing, it's important to be collaborative. It's important to be a team player. That was kind of just the way I always behaved. So I was like that. But when you become a manager, one of the big differences is that you're not just responsible for your own projects, and you're not just defined by your own work, but you're defined by your team's work. So from a practical and pragmatic standpoint, you need your teams to perform, because your success is contingent on their success. So now, fortunately, I happen to really enjoy managing people and managing talent. It's fun for me. It's part of what gets me going. If I'm in an environment where I have a team where there's strong connections and where we're really working in lockstep, that's great and invigorating. And that's part of what I love. And so I'm always really striving to grow my people, help them develop, one of the biggest areas of focus, whether it's communications or marketing or anything, as a functional leader, is developing a great culture, and a culture where you're able to bring out the best in your people, create opportunities for them to grow, create a culture of respect where people treat each other the right way, and also ultimately do great work. And a lot of that depends on the environment that you produce as a manager. So in order to be successful, you have to create that. And being a manager is hard. And, some aspects of that came naturally to me. Others, it's something that you're constantly working on and something that you're growing in. And, now I've worked at a number of different organizations, and you have to adjust your approach to different cultures. So it's, without getting too philosophical, it's one of those things like a garden is never finished, where you're constantly challenging yourself to grow and get better as a manager, and to also look in the mirror when you realize, I could have managed that situation better. I could have managed that person better. Here's areas where I feel like I need to work on. And, it's all a journey in self-improvement. But I kind of went off, but going back to your original question, managing people is key to accomplishing your goals.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Bring out their goals. Yeah, sure.
Oh, I agree 100%. And, as communications professionals, we also know, but also have to be reminded of the importance of good communication in teams. And, even in the best and well-intended scenarios with a bunch of people that are communications professionals, sometimes that can be really challenging. And so learning and knowing your audience and your tone and your message, sometimes I think it's helpful to remind yourself that, like, almost pretend you were a client, just in a different situation, where you really do have to be cognizant of the receiving party.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because a classic cliche is for it transcends, marketing, communications, journalism, is that sometimes you're so focused on the external audiences, you're not looking enough inward. And ultimately, a lot of the little tactical things that you need to do, and I had good managers that I learned from, regularly communicating with your team. As you noted, different people have different ways that they like to communicate. So tailoring your approach as best you can. And again, creating that safe environment where people could give feedback, not worry about being reprimanded, give feedback in a respectful way of all audiences, of everyone on the team, I should say. But I think that creating that environment is key. And also being direct and being straight up with people. And I think for me and a lot of early managers, back when I was an early manager, it took, I think back to that period, which now was a long time ago, and I had to learn how to have tough conversations and be really direct with people. And I think that you fast forward to being a more seasoned leader, and you understand how critical that is to getting the elephant in the room, out of the room, having having that open dialogue, and just understanding what are on people's minds. And ultimately, if done well, it's healthy for all involved. And also as a manager, just really being a good listener, and that's something that I think I've gotten better at over the years. That was another thing that probably didn't come as naturally early on in my career as others, and I got better and better at it. And I think that it's critical that you're not just listening to what your people are saying, but really focused on what are the underlying messages, what are the challenges that they're facing, helping to ask the questions to bring out information. So that way you're able to, the information you need to know as a leader, so that way you're able to truly understand the issues and be there for your team, and ultimately be able to lead your team to do great work.
Yeah, very well said. And along those lines, in terms of working as a team and communication, what are some ways that you found to be successful to balance working from home and staying connected with your team throughout the past year and a half remote and, as you go forward?
Yeah, well, you have to be really intentional, and even more so than when you're in a physical office. I mean, physical office, you could stop by people's desks, you could stop by their offices or cubes. You have conversations in the hallway. When you're in a virtual environment, that's gone. And I, for a long time, have led geographically dispersed teams, so I was used to having to reach out to people and make that effort. Now is just for the entire team. So
Right.
I think part of it is, as a leader, investing the time in staying connected with people. And the other
Mhm.
thing is, you have all those casual, fun conversations that happen in a physical office environment. So you need to make time for that stuff too. And everything can't be just work, work, work. Of course, you need to focus and get your job done, but you need to be able to be comfortable and create comfort for people to understand a call doesn't need to be all business. You want to have those fun calls, whether they're identified as this is a fun call, this is a social call, or more or less just building it in and making that effort to have those team culture building moments, which is harder to do virtual. I think the other thing is that a big factor that's often talked about is burnout. And what I found at Axis, I'm fortunate that I have a fantastic team, a very hardworking team, and there was, I think that you could say in some teams, I've heard people concerned about productivity, or people going to not do their jobs when they're home.
Right.
Like, that hasn't been a problem here, and I think I found that for many other managers have a relatable situation that I have, where my people are working so hard that I need to make sure that I'm telling them, take a break. Like, don't spend so
Mhm.
much time on WebEx or Zoom. Like, build in some time for you to catch your breath. Make sure you take vacation. I know it's, in this world that we've been in for the past almost year and a half, you may not make as much time for vacations. That's finally starting to change. So it's really trying to encourage your team to invest in them, so in themselves, so that they don't burn out.
Yeah. I mean, even just reminding people to eat lunch, I think sometimes, because, I think in the office setting and now sometimes you want to get through your to-do list, or you just get in a groove, but taking those breaks, eating lunch, taking a walk, whatever the different things are that might energize someone, it actually makes you more productive, but also
Absolutely.
makes you healthier and happier too.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, ultimately, I think it's good for everyone involved. The person benefits, the colleague benefits, I should say. But it's, you're going to do better work if you're healthy, and if
Yeah.
mentally you're in a good place.
Do you think people just in general, whether you're, your network or others, do you think the extra work is maybe about people being insecure, that they feel like they have to prove that they're doing just as much as they did in the office? Or do you think it's just having that challenge with the boundaries between the blur of personal and professional, when maybe there's not as much else to do?
I think it could be a mix of reasons, and it probably depends on the individual. Some of it, as you noted, could just be that you're at home more.
Yeah.
You're not traveling. You're not on the go, and it's real easy that you hear your computer ringing or buzzing or whatever it is in
Hmm.
the other room, and you run across the hall. Oh my gosh, I have to answer that or respond to that. So I think that we're all so accessible, and it's for, I think, in the pre-COVID world, it may have been easier to kind of create barriers, mental barriers, where, all right, this is time when I'm at work, this is time when I'm at home, this is time when I'm with my family, and so on. And in the COVID environment, a lot of that became more fuzzy.
Hmm.
So I think that it's important to, as a manager, to be able to understand and maybe it's not even understand, because sometimes it's impossible to know what's happening on the other end of a phone or a computer, but at least put out the message to people that they need to have a certain degree of balance.
Right. And, along those lines, what are some ways that you keep your sanity and your productivity? Because I actually remember too, when I first started, I felt really overwhelmed by the ever-changing to-do list, constantly ripping up paper, crossing things out, erasing things. I tried all sorts of methods. I had an Excel spreadsheet, this and that. And you were one of the people that helped me use my calendar, my Outlook calendar, to actually block out time and budget time for different tasks. And then as I evolved, I also included like take a lunch break or different, healthy reminders. So I'm curious how that's evolved today as you've only gotten busier.
Yeah, and I've gotten busier, but at the same time, I think I've gotten overall mostly better at that, because it's as you have more and more work come in, it almost forces you to be efficient. And you have to decide, where am I going to get involved in? Where won't I get involved in? As you become a more seasoned leader, you learn, all right, you know what? I'm going to have to delegate more of this to my team and trust my team. And if you have good people, let them run with it. And unfortunately, I have fantastic colleagues at Axis. What I'd say is, certain things such as managing your own schedule, I still do some of those same tricks that I taught you back then, where I'll block time on my calendar, and this is time for me to collect my thoughts, respond to email, think, and take care of items that I need to. Even just blocking off time to make sure that you eat, because I think many in fields like ours could, before you know it, could be 3 o'clock and you haven't eaten lunch, or even later. So part of it is reminding yourself to do things like that. Something else I'll sometimes do is I'll turn off my Outlook. And I'm still, you can't go too long without checking your email, the nature of the business we're in, but just not having that ticker of constant prompts as emails are coming in, it gives you a chance to focus on work that may not be urgent, but is important, that could kind of get pushed and pushed and pushed. So it's finding time to do that. And then also just building in time to take a walk, clear your head. One of the benefits of the, it's as challenging and awful as the COVID period has been, one of the benefits is that we've had much more control over our calendars. So taking 20 minutes to exercise, which frankly I don't do enough of, I don't do it regularly, but it's a good thing theoretically to do. But taking 20 minutes to exercise, whether it's taking a walk or whatever it may be, that taking walks I do, that's something that is good and beneficial, and ultimately I would say will make you better at your job, because you're able to process things and put things in perspective.
Right. And, just going back a little bit to, people tend to be interested in the conversation of in-house versus agency. You spent a significant amount of time at MWW in particular, an agency, before pursuing in-house opportunities like Kind Snacks and now Access. How would you explain the differences between the two and what skills are required to succeed?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different game being in-house than being in an agency. I think a lot of the same skills that you just have as a practitioner are similar, as far as, the fundamentals, creative, strategic thought process, the creative process, being able to present yourself verbally, writing, all of that. But the nature of the job's a bit different, and the rhythms of the job are a bit different. So being at an agency, it's so fast moving and so creative, and you've got the amazing experience of having a peek into many different organizations. That I think is fantastic from a development standpoint. You learn so much. And I think at any level, it's fantastic, but you learn so much in that environment. There's a level of randomness within an agency that you see less of in-house, where you could have any number of clients and many crises happening at the same time, which also happens in-house. But it's a little bit different if you have different companies, and it could be happening multiple times across different clients. But new business pitches coming in with no warning, that kind of stuff. When you go in-house, of course, there's randomness. Of course, there's unexpected things, but you have more of a rhythm. You know the key seasons for the business. You could anticipate things a little bit better. But in addition to that, some of the other differences that I noted just a moment ago, an agency, you're seeing a snapshot of many different organizations. When you go in-house, you're going much deeper into one field and one business. So it becomes that much more important to really understand the business and to be not just a good marketer or communications professional, but to be a business strategist, which you should be on the agency side as well, but at a deeper level and really being an expert and investing in understanding the nuances of the business. You know, it starts with really understanding the business, how it makes money, what the business challenges are, where the areas of opportunity are, really having an ear to the street with the people who are working day to day on the front lines. So you just have that understanding and being able to offer very smart, informed counsel based on having a good, deep understanding of the business. I think in addition to that, when you're on the in-house side, it's a different type of pressure when it comes to providing strategic guidance and counsel. I mean, you are the decision maker, and for what you do. And as a result of that, it means that you really have to be decisive. You have to be decisive on the agency side, but again, it's a little bit different. You have to be decisive. You have to be willing to understand that you're going to make decisions, and you'll have to sometimes make big decisions and put your neck out there, and that's part of it. And ultimately, I think it's a really good thing. And because it's a healthy pressure, and if you're very vested in the company, it's exciting too, and you feel like you're able to make a big imprint. So what I would say is that there's a lot of benefits and exciting things to being on the agency side. I love working at Axis. I love being on the in-house side. I also learned so much and had so many great learnings and experiences working at Kind too, that it's there's great experiences in both, but it's with the in-house experience, it's definitely a different game, as I said before. But fortunately at Axis, I've found a company that is fantastic, and I'm just so happy there.
And what's so great is when you started out, you, I believe, were in more corporate communications.
Yeah.
And then, which touched on finance, and then you really focused for a while on, food and beverage and CPG.
Yeah.
Running a practice and everything there, and big accounts. And it's just, so it's very telling that then your two in-house jobs are actually, one in CPG and one in finance, and having that grounding, I'm sure, was very helpful for you.
Oh, it was huge. And, I cut my teeth during the dot-com era, and I worked on B2B companies and financial services organizations. And that was where I developed my learnings and my early views of communications and how communications worked, and began to get an understanding of integrated marketing too. But the integrated marketing piece of it really scaled up when I became a hybrid and started to get more and more experience on the consumer marketing piece of it. And that's another example of the benefits of, particularly at that point for me in my career, being able to get those different types of experiences, because it gave me flexibility in what I wanted to do later in my career. And it was interesting because I had the benefit of working with leaders, like true experts, like Michael Kempner, Corrine Winters, Rich Tauberman, who I mentioned before, experts in executive branding, crisis communications, issues management. And in some of those early years, I may have just been the junior person on the team, but I picked up a lot. And then it was interesting because one of the big opportunities that changed my career was I was working on the Bally account, which was a corporate account. And a guy named John Harris came on board as on the client side, heading it up. And he started to do some different things and got Bally much more focused on marketing and promotion. And John, today is, he's a great mentor, close, dear friend. And he went on to Sara Lee and Hillshire, and now he runs global comms for ConAgra. But having that experience of experiencing what John did there and starting on the corporate financial support crisis work, and then eventually having that experience of working with him on the integrated marketing, and then that opened the door for other client experience. Right. It was career changing, and at the time I knew it was interesting, and I was into it, and I liked it, and that was, and John was a big part of what kept me so engaged and interested in the field. And then, you fast forward, and fortunately, I've had the opportunity to run not just comms but marketing and at a financial services company. And I found that a lot of those early experiences shaped my view. And of course, you continue to learn and develop as you get more and more seasoned. But that formative period was crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you touched on a lot of great things: the importance of active listening. We really pride ourselves on knowing our clients' businesses and the sectors as if they were our own, and really, really being that expert of your craft, because you're the voice, you're driving the message. So you need to have substance behind it, not just fluffy, messages.
Absolutely.
You also mentioned how you're now doing more integrated marketing. So let's talk maybe about how you think public relations has evolved and how it works hand in hand or fits into marketing. Is it everyone has a little bit of a different view on it, I think. Is communications overarching and marketing and PR is part of that? Are they separate but working together? What's your view on the relationship between traditional marketing, public relations, and overall communications?
Yeah, well, I mean, the short answer is, to me, it's all part of the same pie. And with at Axis, we made the strategic decision to combine the functions and then we had, when I joined Axis, I was running the legacy comms function, and now I oversee what's a truly integrated function that has 3 pillars, and each pillar has both marketing and communications professionals. And my philosophy is that you could look at comms and what was traditionally comms, which was earned media, and they're the PR, they're the people who you call when things go wrong. And then you look at what was marketing, which has always been more tightly intertwined with sales and business production and owning the brand, owning the creative, being highly trackable. And now, I would say, going back now about 15 years in particular, as social media began to get mainstream, you started to see the lines rapidly blur. And nowadays you have so much work that would fall in the, what some may define as communication sphere, where there's much more involvement in the brand management and cultivating and building the brand. Comms has become, like traditional comms, has become much more measurable. Marketing has adopted certain characteristics that had that may have once fallen into comms. But I don't try to look at it through those 2 pillars anymore. Again, as I said, it's all part of the same approach, or it'll all ladder back to the same objectives. So as we look at it within Axis, and what's right for our organization is we follow a truly agnostic approach as it relates to leveraging marketing and communications to accomplish our goals. So whatever, if I look at a different strategic initiative or program or campaign, whatever are the right levers to use to help us achieve our goals, the right combination of whatever sort of advertising or digital or social or earned media, whatever the right mix is, we'll leverage that, and we won't create artificial barriers. And at the end of the day, it all needs to be highly measurable, and everything should really be grounded in data, and that should help guide our decision-making process. So that's today how I look at the functions. And again, as I noted, that's what works within Axis. I think every organization is a little bit different, but nonetheless, my philosophy is that the functions are intrinsically linked and work much better together than they do if you're operating them in separate pillars.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I think understanding the business objectives and that being the driver is key. And then realizing that the brand identity isn't going to change just because you're talking to a reporter versus developing a thought leadership piece versus in a sales presentation. The approach and maybe the tone and the delivery, but the story, the brand identity doesn't change. So I think that's something that people sometimes lose sight of. Yeah, it shouldn't change.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think also if you give different you talk about team development and professional development, it's good to, I believe, of course people need to know their roles, but it's good to build teams where you have multi-skilled players who at the very least understand the perspective of how different functions work within the larger Marcom sphere. And from a recruitment and growth standpoint, it's nice to give people the chance to swim in more than one lane. It's great for their growth, and like I said, it helps create a broader perspective for everyone involved on the team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And let's just talk a little bit about the discipline of crisis management. So, are there any best practices that you've learned to become an effective crisis manager?
I mean, there's so many. Like I said, I had the benefit of coming up under really strong people and people who were experts in the field. And I got to witness some pretty gnarly crises very early in my career. But what I'd say, and I had the benefit of being able to learn, well, my bosses were on the front line. So and then eventually I got a chance to be in the hot seat myself, managing some pretty big crises. What I say is that one of the biggest pieces of advice is it's all about preparation. And there's certain things you can prepare for and certain things you can't. But there's having a crisis plan and having a crisis action protocol and a methodology, that's table stakes. You should always have that, and having everything that goes into the good hygiene of having a system and a process for managing issues as they arise. That's a critical part of preparation. Part of it too is stepping back and looking at the business and doing your best to identify where are there vulnerabilities, where can issues arise, what are thinking about different scenarios, identifying trigger events, going through doing your best to really take an objective view about what some of the threats are that are facing the organization, and not to do it every so often, to do it regularly. I mean, we're in an environment that's incredibly dynamic, where there's unprecedented, I believe, unprecedented amounts of technological, social, economic change, and you have political too, and you have in that environment, all of that impacts the businesses that we represent and impacts our function. So you constantly need to be studying what's happening outside your company, what's happening inside your company, trying to anticipate whatever you can and being prepared and thinking through, how would I handle this situation? How would I handle that situation? And, you don't need to over-engineer things, but you should have some baseline thinking in place for what seem to be likely threats. So I think preparation is integral to any piece of it. But then another piece of it is being able to be agile, decisive, being level-headed, and ultimately, if you're prepared well, it helps everything else. But there's a lot of there's a ton of different insights and guidance that I could point to, but I would point to preparation and having good anticipatory thinking is probably the big one.
Yeah, I mean, you really, when you're in the communications marketing role, you're in the center of a storm. People are going to be coming to you, and you need to be that calm.
Absolutely.
So if you're freaking out, it's going to be really tough for the people around you.
Yeah, no, that's 100% it. And I think that if you, that's also oftentimes when people really, especially when you look at legacy, what you call legacy comms, that's where the function really has shown. It's when, your CEO, whoever the organizational leader needs you, and you bring this expertise, and you are that calm in the eye of the storm, and you're able to guide a strong path forward. That's you take a challenge and hopefully turn it into an opportunity to prove your mettle. But yeah, I think that being able to steel yourself and have that calmness is it's a critical part of crisis management, but it's also just a critical part of leadership.
Mm-hmm. And preparedness is one way to stay calm. Are there other ways that you found, even sometimes in day-to-day, things can get really timely and sensitive, ways that people can keep calm and carry on?
Yeah, I think part of it is being able to have different ways to manage yourself, whether it's making sure that you're able to put the pause button, step back, think about things, don't be reactive, put things in perspective, talk to others who are trusted when you have time. Oftentimes it's as simple as a quick call to a colleague or a trusted friend or mentor who works in the field, and make informed decisions when you can. So some of it could be counseling others, putting in that extra little bit of time to research a scenario so you understand, is this as bad as I think it is? But in any instance, not being reactive and taking the time, even if it's just 5 minutes or a few minutes, to be able to pause, think, put things in perspective, make sure that you truly understand the situation before you start making decisions. Those are, I think that could be applicable to almost anything.
Absolutely. That's great advice. We have about 10 minutes. I have some more questions, but I'll just open it up to those on the Clubhouse. If anyone did want to ask anything, you can just raise your hand, and then we'll call on you and you can ask Joe a question. Let's see. All right. Well, we're going to keep going, but if anyone has any questions, you can just raise your hand, and then we're happy to patch in. So, a couple other questions. You have had a lot of volunteer involvement and leadership experience in the PR industry. PRSA was a big one, and I'm sure there's others. So how did you figure out where to spend your time outside in these areas? Because there's, especially, at the time being, in New York City, there's so many things to do. There's fortunately so many organizations to be involved in, especially cross-sector. So how did you figure out where to focus your time in the volunteer capacity?
Yeah, well, I think when I began, I just kind of instinctively went to areas that were of interest to me. And PRSA was particularly interesting because it started in such a small way, and then eventually I became national chair of the whole organization. But I had been doing one of my jobs at MWW was I was doing the PR for the PR firm, and there was the New Jersey chapter of PRSA, and there was a member of the chapter said, "Hey, we'd love to get MWW more involved. We were the largest firm in the state at that time. I'm sure MWW still has got to be, and we'd love to get you involved." And I went to a couple meetings. I thought, this is really interesting. I was very loyal to MWW, and I had an interest, a curiosity to meet other professionals while still being fully vested in what I was doing at MWW. And PRSA gave me that opportunity to extend my perspective, hear what people were saying at other firms and other companies and other agencies. And I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. Also, I got to run events, run programming. Eventually I was chapter president, and then I went on to be district president, and then I was on the national board, and then eventually became chair. And what I noticed with PRSA was that at every level there, I was able to be slightly ahead of where I was at that point at MWW, where I was getting a chance to run things in a different way and test my leadership styles and test my abilities. And then I ultimately took it back to my job. And I stayed at MWW 15 years. And I think that it was helpful having that view of PRSA, because I was able to still kind of learn about other people and build my network and have my basically job that I loved at MWW and be able to get the best of both worlds, and also get a chance to spread my wings and be a manager in a different way. So it was very complimentary.
Right.
Now, I spent almost all my waking hours either volunteering or working at MWW. So what wound up happening, fast forward to now, as a parent and a husband, I just, I can't spend as much time volunteering as I did back then. So I need to be more selective. And part of it also is coaching my team, more selective with my hours and I think just more strict with my hours, but coaching my team to get those opportunities and encouraging them to get out there and join groups, whether it's PRSA or Page Up, or getting involved supporting organizations like IPR. So there's a lot of great groups out there. So what I'd say is, I think that for new professionals listening, I think it's terrific to get involved in those organizations, and then you'll start understanding the subtopics that are of interest. So D&I was something that was always really important to me. And, that became one of the, a lot of the different organizations that I was volunteering with. I seemed to always just get involved with the D&I work because that was of interest to me. And then similarly, learning about measurement, there were different areas that I tended to gravitate towards. And so that's what I would say early on. Getting back to your question, I kind of just spent all my waking hours volunteering and working, which I don't know if that's the most healthy thing, but that was me, and that's where I was then. Now what I do is I'll tend to pick one thing and concentrate my energy there. And I may be parts of other groups, but I just will dedicate most of my time to one area. But I would say today, at this moment, having a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, I'm not spending nearly, they are the one thing right now outside of work. And, I'm doing a little bit of volunteering, but it's not at all what it was. But even as when my first son was born, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to, at that point, I was very focused on PRSA Foundation. I was pretty involved in Page and IPR, but I kind of doubled down on the D&I work in particular that transcended all three. And then, now, parenting's a full-time job. So that's kind of the focus today.
That's great. And I think it speaks to just being a good example of, you've always had goals and certainly ambitions, but you were also very present in what your experience was at the time. So prior to being a parent, you maybe had more time and you really maximized it. And, through each experience you had, you were very present and you got so much out of it. And, especially on the PR industry side, you now have a very strong legacy, as a result of that too. So I just think that really speaks to the importance of, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And just, you can achieve your goals without always looking ahead, and just really focusing on what you're doing now. Because, things will change. And then you can focus on whatever that might be at that time.
No, that's true. And it's interesting too, that I'm thinking about a conversation that you and I had years ago, where, you talk about how do you, even with everything that you just said, sometimes you still have to figure out how to squeeze things into your schedule. And I remember you were sharing with me a conversation that you had with your father, where you said that, you're talking to him and you were on a bus going somewhere and you were working on the bus, and you were talking to me, you're like, man, it's just so much. And he said,
I wanted to read a book.
And he said something to the effect of, hey, you're a grown up now. And when I think about a lot of things, as it relates to juggling, it's whereas in the past I may have had to say, like, this hour is focused, or that hour is focused, or here's when I'm going to be able to do this. You start getting used to doing work incrementally. And, I'm going to max out these 10 minutes, or I'm going to dedicate 5 minutes to getting this right. And you just learn how to be as efficient as possible with your time, which is, requires a certain amount of discipline.
Yeah, well, that's great. We have a question from the audience that I have a private message on from Matt that was having trouble calling on him. So the question is, do you have any mentors now that you really lean on for senior level advice? And generally, what do you do to stay sharp?
Yeah, I talk fairly regularly to people who, John Harris is an example of one who I shared, fairly regularly to people who I think are just experts and lead. I said that my aspiration is to be a master in the craft. There's people who are an example. John Iwata is someone who I seek counsel from. Like, he is unquestionably like the master. So having a chance to speak to people like, John, well, I mentioned both Johns. I think that those, I'll fairly regularly talk to a number of people like that who I'll pick their brain on things. Folks who've been in the same position. When I took on, now it's been over a year and a half, but when I took on the oversight of marketing, I spoke to a number of people who I still talk to who had overseen both comms and marketing. So I think in general, yes, absolutely. And I think that mentorship always continues. It's important to have the humility to know that you don't know everything, and that you really need to seek advice and test your thinking against people who have been there and who are brilliant at what they do, and who are willing to also challenge you and call you out when your thinking may be flawed.
Right. And one last question. If you could look back at yourself, however many years ago when you were first starting out, what might you tell yourself now based on what you've learned?
I think when I first started, I really cared. I still really care, obviously, but I not only really cared about the job, I wanted everything to be perfect. Like, nothing could go wrong. And I had an awful lot of anxiety that I put on myself, and I shared that anxiety with my team at times. And, that was learning in and of itself. I think that what I would say to myself is, it's good that you feel that pressure, but inevitably things aren't going to always go as planned. Things are going to go wrong, and you're going to have learnings, and some really painful learnings. And that's okay. The key is that when that happens, you accept it, you take what you can from the experience, and you make yourself better. And you look in the mirror and understand, hey, you know what? Here's what I could have done better. And and ultimately you make yourself better, and you learn from it. And it's all part of the journey. So I think that that's something, I probably heard stuff like that, but it's one thing to hear it. It's another thing to go through it. But that's probably would have been helpful to have beaten into my head a little bit harder when I was starting off.
Yep. Very well said. Well, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything that you want to add that we didn't ask you?
No, fantastic questions. I mean, Rachel, you're really testing me. so thank you. Really great questions. And I'm just, I give you a lot of credit for putting forward this, this podcast or these talks. It's, I think you ask really deep, thoughtful questions. So it's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to, we're going to leave the clubhouse. Thank you for those that joined us today. We really appreciate it. The content will be available on our website and via YouTube shortly, as well as on Spotify as a podcast. And we will share it on social media for all to see as well.